and welcome back to Fighting for the Truth. Remember, here at Fighting for the Truth, we buy the truth and we sell it not. Remember, you cannot sell the truth, you got to give it away. And why do we give it away? Because it's the truth. That is why we give it away. Today, we're going to be talking about Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson. So, just yesterday, he signed an executive order and it was titled just this. Guess what? ICE on notice executive order. Now, if you're not really familiar who Brandon Johnson is, he is a black mayor who defeated Lori Lightfoot back in 2023. His policies were much stronger when it comes to a heavy hand on sanctuary cities, on trying to destroy everything that the Trump administration has put in place. And he spotted that he was going to bring down the crime, violent crimes, that is, in Chicago, and also to bridge the gap with the community. Now, his version of bridging the gap is allegedly tying the hands of ICE agents within his city because he believes that ICE is doing a um, aggressive job. They're doing a job that is very forceful, and ultimately, he believes that ICE is there to hurt and not help. Now, many may agree and disagree with that, but I disagree. ICE has been put and placed in cities like uh, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Los Angeles, California. They even came to my home state of Raleigh, North Carolina, and also Charlotte, North Carolina. They are in Chicago and Cook County of Illinois. And Brandon Johnson has stated that he wants to put them on notice. He wants to ensure that the qualified immunity does not stretch to these ICE agents who he deems are breaking laws, who are violating constitutional rights within the First Amendment of the citizens that he served, with a special emphasis and interest on illegal immigrants. He believes that they are getting the bad and the short end of the stick. So Brendan on yesterday signed this executive order. And when we look at No King's protest, there should be a No King's protest centered around Chicago. And why that is, no mayor has the authority, okay, to detain, apprehend, or lock up any law enforcement officer, despite what power they think they may have. Now, one would say, well, he's not going to do it. He has given the orders to his Chicago Police Department to do this under the authorities of the police chief. The problem we have with that is qualified immunity was given to us by the federal government for every law enforcement officer. And what is it exactly is qualified immunity? Qualified immunity says this in a nutshell, that an officer who is acting within their duties, who is acting within the Constitution, who is acting then within their state laws as it pertains to the motor vehicle and criminal laws, have qualified immunity from instances where people, the subject, the defendant, wants to come back and sue for whatever type of reparation or reimbursement or retaliation that they may come up with due to the effect of an arrest, or maybe not an arrest, but they feel as if their civil rights or their constitutional rights were violated. They can petition the courts and seek a civil penalty, a civil tort on behalf of themselves, an entity, or an organization due to that law enforcement officer that had the encounter with them. That is what qualified immunity looks like. It protects us. Again, if we're doing all those things I mentioned within the law, we're protected. Mayor Johnson believes that there should not be protection if the officers are acting outside of their scope of directions from Christy Noam, our Secretary of DHS, or any other type of direction, even from Tom Homan and others within DHS as it pertains to ICE raids, ICE apprehensions. He believes he has the power to open up an investigation, petition, and subpoena body camera footage from these agents and decide that they should be not criminally charged, but there should be a civil penalty on their behalf, which means they would take them to court and try to have the qualified immunity expunged from that particular said ICE agent. So, this is what he has been doing over the weekend, not helping his city advance within the crimes that are still going on with Chicago having the highest murder rate. He's not focused on that. What he's focused on is civilly holding ICE agents in a bind where he could essentially file lawsuits. But we have to go back and look at just back on January, I believe, the 18th, January, there was a mother of five murdered, gunned down in his city. And it took law enforcement over 10 hours to find this particular woman. And guess what? This was done by gun violence. But here we are spouting and saying that we're not going to allow ICE to come in and do what they're supposed to do. We're going to hold them accountable. We're not going to let them just wreak havoc on our city with a special interest on illegal immigrations, making sure that everyone knows that they are a sanctuary city. And by the way, they have been since 1995. They believe that they are protected outside from any type of state or federal law as it pertains to protecting illegal immigrants. Believe they shouldn't have the authority to come in and remove said person from their jurisdiction because they have deemed themselves and their city, their county, their state as being sanctuary. But the problem with that is qualified immunity was given to us and it cannot be taken away. You could try with a lawsuit, but again, if that officer or agents were acting within their scope of law enforcement and their duties and their authorities, they are protected from any type of civil tort. So there you have it there. But I want to definitely go back to this particular incident because it is mind-boggling that it would take the city police over 10 hours to locate this particular woman by the name of Kiara Jenkins. Okay, again, she was found shot multiple times in an alley in Chicago back on January the 8th in the 6400 block of South Drexel Avenue in the Woodland neighborhood. Now, a friend of Miss Jenkins actually found her body because she was trying to figure out why she didn't come to church that day. And as we know, every Christian that is a churchgoer knows if you miss a couple Sundays, your fellow churchgoers, your fellow church members will be asking for you if you are a person who is normally in place. So this woman went out looking for Miss Jenkins and somehow she came across and she was able to locate her. Okay. But again, took the police over 10 hours to find out where she was. Again, these are the things that Mayor Johnson should be focused on most. Now, when you go and look up and dig up records, you find out that they have a decrease in violent crimes according to their statistics. According to his administration, they are praising the fact they've been able to, under the bracket of the Chicago Police Department, lower and decrease violent crimes within that city and bridging the gap together between community and law enforcement. But here we are again looking at the fact that he spends more time on the Trump administration denouncing what they're doing and trying to rid them than focusing on the issues at hand. And the real matter is not whether ICE is acting unruly or doing their job. And of course, Mayor Johnson has said and put on record that law enforcement will not assist and collaborate with ICE, and that is their prerogative. In my opinion, they should help out. We're all under one bracket, and that is law enforcement. Again, as long as we're acting within our scope authority of what we do, but he deems Chicago to be a sanctuary city, welcoming every person to that city. You'll be protected. Ultimately, looking at this, if you commit crimes within that city, definitely if you're wanted by the federal government under the Trump administration, you are protected. Come to their city, they will protect you from any type of apprehension, deportation, anything like that, because they are a sanctuary city. And the policies in place is what they've been doing for years. Now, they want to prohibit the agencies from, again, even helping cooperate or collaborating with the federal agents during this time under the Trump administration. Let's make that very clear. It has to be said under the Trump administration. So they're focused more on restricting ICE within their city than focusing on the actual crimes at hand, and that is murders that are committed through the acts of a handgun. This is what we should be focused on, but instead, Mayor Johnson has put in place an executive order, ICE notice. This is why we state and we talk about voting in weak leaders, ones that have an agenda focused on a society where they want to make the calls, they want to be the shot caller, they want to only look at certain issues that plague the community. And as of right now, ICE is plaguing their community. They want to focus more on that than really focusing on the issue at hand, heinous violent crimes. Now, under the old podcast name, Real Talk with Officer Antoine Thomas, I talked about the most dangerous cities to live in our nation. And Chicago made that list time and time again. So we cannot refute the fact that crime is out of control there, but instead we want to focus on the issue that, again, to them serves most important, and that is ICE raids at this point. Now, I want to be the first to say that ICE can do things better. They could go through some de escalation training or more of de escalation training. They could even look at some of their tactics because I believe sometimes they're getting a little bit out of hand, but neither am I there or am I in their shoes to be able to make the calls that they're making. But I would and I will say we see it in Minnesota, some of the things that they're doing when they're being recorded as it pertains to ICE is a little bit aggressive. And I can tell you that in local law enforcement, it would not fly. We would be investigated with the IA. We would most likely be put on administrative leave or fired for some of the things that I've seen. And I only say that because some of these things that we're seeing are self induced. I've seen videos where ICE agents walk up to a person in the vehicle who's filming, and they're not within the scope of what they're doing, meaning ICE. They're not getting involved. They're just maybe yelling obscenities or blowing the horn, doing things like that. And they're filming these agents. I've seen one video where the ICE agent actually slapped the camera out of their hand. And under the First Amendment right, and First Amendment, as it pertains, it is our right to film. It is our right to have freedom of speech. And it is also our right to be protected as it pertains to the information that we put out. So at the end of the day, this person wanted to make a live video. They have that right to do that as long as they're not doing what I talked about in a couple episodes ago, obstructing and delaying, or delaying obstructing. They're good to go. Now, when that person gets within the movement where there is an incident taking place live in real time and they get involved by filming and coming up right on the agents, that is a safety violation, and it is a safety issue. Therefore, they can react, whatever that may look like. But when they're just casually driving down the road or stopping them and talking to them and distracting them, it's up to the ICE agent if he or she wants to continue conversation. I would say discontinue, keep going forward with the mission at hand, because it is all a distraction and to throw you off your game. So we look at qualified immunity within the whole makeup of every law enforcement officer. We're given this. It cannot be taken away by a mayor, by a police chief, or even the president. And we know that President Trump spoke about this in his 2024 bid for president, that he wanted to make sure that every officer, law enforcement officer, had qualified immunity. And I got into many debates with people on the left and Trump haters who said, "Well, you all just want to be able to do it." Even some of my buddies said, "You all just want to be able to do what you want." Trump is praising y'all. He's actually giving y'all the power and authority to go out and beat people up and violate their civil rights and their First Amendment rights. And at the end of the day, none of that is true. Trump did not say. I know many people say he said you can go out there and fire a weapon, kill somebody in the street, and you're protected. That would never be so. The person that we shot did not present a line of deadly force from what we reasonably believe to be the use or imminent use thereof of deadly force. We have no authority to shoot and kill them. Okay. And keep in mind, deadly force does not have to be done with a handgun. We can go all the way back to Renee Good. Her vehicle, I talked about this, was a deadly weapon because she used it in such of a manner. A 4,500-pound vehicle. Okay. So at the end of the day, we cannot just sit here and skip the facts of what is taking place. You heard me on record say that ICE could use more training. So I've already beat that horse. I'm not going to stay there. But what I do know is everybody that's spouting this are watching this from the comforts of their home, on their televisions, on their social media platforms, on their electronic devices. You're not in the midst of what they're doing. It is a hard job that they have. They've been spit upon, frozen water bottles thrown on them, vehicles being damaged. We saw that with Pretty a couple weeks prior to him being killed. We watched him on film kicking a ICE vehicle, ICE law enforcement vehicle, to the point he struck it so hard he knocked out the back right tail light. That is damage to government property. So we see that there was a crime committed. He should have been locked up that particular day in question, but that's neither here or there. He's not alive. But what I'm saying is we apply the same amount of pressure and force that is applied upon us as it pertains to law enforcement. And I would tell any law enforcement officer only do the amount that has been pushed upon you. And we can rid all of this. But at the end of the day, you have Mayor Johnson who stated that he wants to come in and discontinue qualified immunity if he deems that a ICE agent has violated civil rights. He wants an open investigation, ultimately a prosecution done, which he doesn't have the power to do any of this. We look at the sheriff in Philadelphia. She is on record for saying that she was going to give the ICE agents the smoke if they came into her county and committed crime. She even called them wannabe law enforcement officers. That is on record. You can go back and watch it. Rochelle Blau, Sheriff Blau, said these things. She even doubled down when she went into another interview because the media wanted to know, what did you mean by you're going to give them the smoke? And what she said was, when they come into my county and they act unruly, aggressively, as if they can do anything they want, we're going to look at it and we're going to lock them up if they violate crimes. Well, guess what? She has no authority to lock up a federal agent, especially if they're acting within their scope, their authority, and in their duty. She does not have the right to do it. And so at the end of the day, we look at all this and we say to her, you cannot do it. You don't have the power to do it. So therefore, we go back to say, you're just speaking out of turn and you're speaking out the side of your neck. Now, if the officers within question, the ICE agents, are violating rights and they are actually physically committing crimes, then they could look at some type of criminal penalty and ultimately a civil tort, which falls under qualified immunity if all these things I've just mentioned to you has taken place. Okay, so we have to look at the facts, and that's what we do here on Fighting for the Truth. So I wanted to debunk that particular myth. They do not have the power just to come in and lock ICE agents up because they don't like the fact that they're in their counties. They don't have the authority to do this. Now, keep in mind, a civil tort is not the same as a criminal issue. Civil torts are just that. It is ultimately seeking a redress of a lawsuit, most times seeking some type of financial or monetary gain from said lawsuit. That is what this qualified immunity shields us from civil lawsuits. Now, there has been many that has been tried, and there's going to continue to be many qualified immunity cases. Some win, some lose. But at the end of the day, you have to keep in mind, as long as we're acting within our scope, our authority, and we're not violating rights, we're there for set purpose, and we are making good on those purposes, we are immune from any type of civil tort. So that's what that looks like. But Mayor Johnson wants a full investigation launch if he deems that these ICE agents have violated constitutional rights. Now, when you look at qualified immunity, it is exactly what it is. Again, it is the protection from civil penalties from the outside source or subject or entity or organization who believes that law enforcement officers should be held accountable. Of course, we heard back in 2020, Police Accountability, Law Enforcement Accountability Act. A lot of states, definitely blue states, were signing into state law these accountability acts, and it was ultimately to tie the hands of law enforcement after George Floyd to say we need to put more emphasis on making sure these officers are doing what they are trained to do, what they have been sworn to do, and we want to make sure there's checks and balances. There was always checks and balances on us. Do I believe sometimes we get it wrong? Absolutely. But these cities thought it would be best, and states, to come up with policies and procedures, ultimately um, state laws that will tie law enforcement's hand, that would ultimately look at the fact that we would be scared to do our job appropriately and the right way because we were afraid of civil torts and criminal charges from what the outside person deemed to be that we were acting negligently, intentfully, and intentionally and knowingly committing a crime, which I'm all for any officer who does those things or overexerts their authority and power or who abuses their power. Absolutely look into it, investigate it. But on the average day, I know many good law enforcement officers like myself who go out, put the uniform on, and we swore to the oath and we try our best every day to please the citizens and do what's right and to rid criminals off of the streets and to make sure our um, streets and highways are safe and protected by enforcing the motor vehicle laws. That is what we do. Every officer wants to do that. There are bad within who wants to wreak havoc, but for 99.1% of law enforcement officers, we want to do the job right, efficiently, and we want to do it under the bracket of making sure the constituents that we serve, or I should say the citizens that we serve, are feeling and are um, safe, and that they understand that we're there to help and not hinder. 99.1% of them want to do this. I would even say 99.9% want to do this. The numbers are higher because that's the oath that we swore to. So we're not there to cause harm. We're not there to wreak havoc. We're there only to help. And that is what we're doing. But Brandon Johnson believes ICE is out of control, believes that they need to be looked at, ultimately trying to keep them from coming into his city and doing the work that they have been asked to do by the administration and their supervisors, their directors, and ultimately what the citizens of the USA, America, has asked them to do. And that is rid every violent, illegal immigrant that's entered this country, every criminal who has entered this country illegally, to round them up, to find them, to round them up, to apprehend them and to, guess what, escort them out of our country. That is what ICE was created for after 9/11. And at the end of the day, it is important that we do it because there's a lot that want to wreak havoc on Americans. So here you have the mayor coming in. Again, he deems that this is more important than keeping his citizens safe, to stop the violent shootings. And how do we stop that? Aggressive patrolling by the police department, going out into the worst areas of their community, of their city, and creating a task force, going into these areas, doing aggressive, again, patrols, saturating those areas with blue lights, getting out on foot, having involuntary encounters with these subjects, gang members, to find out what they're doing, what they're up to, what they have on them, and stopping crimes like the one that happened to the young lady, the mother of five. Not focusing on ICE and tying their hands and wanting to look at their body cameras and finding out what they're doing wrong. Let's get to the heart and the meat of the matter. And that's what the matter lies. So when you look at that, that is what Mayor Johnson is trying to do. Qualified immunity. It's been put in place. It's been put into Constitution. We cannot get rid of it. It is something that has been given to us, and I wouldn't even say into the Constitution. It's been given to us into the federal laws as it pertains to law and order. So it cannot be disturbed. It cannot be taken away, no matter how hard you try. Again, long as we're acting within the parameters of what we're supposed to be doing as law enforcement, we are entitled to qualified immunity. And as long as there's no rights violated, we're good to go. Constitutional. The Constitution protects us, and that is what we're going to continue to do. It's only right that we do it. Now, let's talk about, again, Chicago. According to reports, they have been able to decrease their violent crimes within that city. But again, on January 18th, we had a very deadly and heinous shooting that took place. Don't know how the family of Miss Kiara Jenkins can sleep at night knowing that their daughter, their cousin, their sister, okay, their mother was gunned down in the alley, left there to die, which she did ultimately die. Took police 10 hours to find her, maybe because they were out looking for ICE agents who were trying to do their job, who were trying to apprehend people who are violent to that particular area who shouldn't be there in the first place. Maybe they were so busy watching them and trying to search for them and to see what they're doing rather than patrolling the streets of Chicago to rid these types of, again, heinous crimes. Now, who is Mayor Brandon Johnson? We know he beat out Mayor Lori Lightfoot back in 2023, but who exactly is he? Well, he was a social studies school teacher who later went on into the political world to become a county commissioner, where he served the first district there up until 2023, where he won the mayoral election. Now, here he is sitting at the top of the city, and he doubled down on what that city looks like as it pertains to a sanctuary city. And now he is there telling all the constituents there that you will be safe from any type of federal policies or federal rulings or any type of federal law enforcement acts that take place. ICE, we're going to protect you. Come to Cook County, and this is a sanctuary city. We accept one, we accept all. This is what he is doing within that makeup. Now, under the ordinances of Chicago, the police and the employees are forbidden. He has forbidden them for even asking about or disclosing the immigration status of an immigrant to the federal government. They're not giving information. Again, I told you that he doesn't want police collaborating, partnering, and networking with the federal government with a special interest on ICE because he does not believe that they're doing the job that they said they were going to do. Neither does he believe that they should be doing the job that they're doing. And he thinks that it's heavy handed and he believes they need checks and balances. And he's there to assist in that by ICE on notice. Now, it's a clever name, but the reality of ICE on notice is just this: ICE is going to do what they have to do because they have been given the authority by the great President Donald Trump to do this, acting under the authority of the DHS Secretary, Secretary Nome. No federal cooperation. This is what Johnson has put and placed on the Chicago Police Department. Does not want them to assist in any type of criminal or civil immigration issue. Okay? This is what he is trying to do. He doesn't want any city services going towards the efforts, including emergency services. He wants to make sure that they are not, in regards to the immigration status of his citizens, disclosed of. Okay? This is what Johnson is doing. Now, since guess what, 1985 or 40 years ago, all right, the city of Chicago deemed themselves to be a sanctuary city, and they're still holding tried and true to that as of today. Now, Minnesota has tried. We see what's happened there. There's two murders so far, or killings of anti ICE people. We got to call it like it is, anti ICE people within that city of Minnesota or Minneapolis, where they have committed crimes on ICE agents, ultimately ending their lives of pretty and good. So you look at that, Minnesota is suing the federal government. They want ICE out of their city and their state. So Tim Walz has put up a lawsuit with his Attorney General Keith Ellison to try and get ICE kicked out of their state, which federal policies supersede those of state policy when it comes to issues of law enforcement. They're there for a reason. So that lawsuit was shot down, of course. And you look at New York, the governor in New York, Kathy Hochul, tried to also do the same thing, but instead she introduced a bill on last Friday, which would aim to ban local law enforcement officers from being deputized by the ICE agency. She doesn't want them to take part in any type of enforcement actions or any type of operation that they're doing within her state. So she's blocking the NYPD, all of the agencies, Nassau PD, all these agencies that make up New York. She wants to ban them for cooperating again, partnering and networking with ICE. And at the end of the day, it is counterproductive to do that because as law enforcement, we're there to network, collaborate, and ultimately reach the goal that we set out to reach. And I know it does not look pretty. I said this on Newsmax just the other day. Law enforcement is not pretty. It is a situation where sometimes we have to get our hands messy and dirty, but we only do what is given to us. We're there to, if we have a peaceful encounter, we leave peacefully. If it's not a peaceful encounter and people are becoming violent, that means that we have to apply the same, if not greater, amount of force that has been pushed upon us. That is the issue with law enforcement. People forget that, but that is what we fall under. And that is why you see these encounters happening and some are becoming deadly. It's because of the fact that we have been given the same, if not more, force. So therefore, we have to push back. Now, what we saw in Minnesota with Preddy, I believe it was too heavy-handed, too many officers or agents on one person. I believe if they would have took a step back and understood, because there was a miscommunication there, obviously with the handgun. They already had removed the handgun. When one agent stated gun, which is a code for sometimes for us to say that person has a gun on them, react quickly, swiftly, because there's an imminent threat that is happening in real time. So I believe that person, that agent heard that and assumed that there was a gun on the person, not realizing that that gun had already been removed. Therefore, that officer felt as if he needed to, because I'm sure Preddy's hands was all over the place because they're trying to apprehend him. And this agent obviously thought that Preddy was going for a gun, not knowing that the gun had already been taken away. He shot. And many people say, why did he shoot that many times? I believe it was about 9 times. They said he shot him. Can't speak on that, but what I can say, adrenaline's pumping. And once you put your hand on the trigger in a stressful situation, it's most likely you're going to keep that hand on the trigger. It's the same with a taser in some occasions. I've witnessed that myself because you're so heightened, you're so elevated, everything's happening in real time, and you are in a stressful situation and things like this take place, which is why we train constantly to not to run into these issues. But there's going to be times we do it. But thankfully, I've never had to shoot anyone. But what I will say is that typically happens with statistics show that officer who is firing his weapon, his or her weapon, they're firing multiple times. Now we're trained to stop the threat. And so once the threat is stopped, we're supposed to stop. However, we understand that this guy Preddy was already getting apprehended and gunshots rang out. Well, if they would have took a step back, speaking of those ICE agents, and reduced the amount of officers that was on him, that would have made the situation less chaotic within that moment, and they could have had more control, and it would have been a situation where they could actually see with a clear picture what was going on. But with all that commotion, all those agents on one guy, in the midst of that, it was very chaotic, and therefore mistakes happen. So I'm not condoning that. Neither am I taking up for the ICE agents. I was not there. What we do know, it was a situation that was highly elevated and it was out of control. We saw that. Nobody watching that video could say the scene was controllable. There was no de-escalation taking place there. Now, did not mean that Preddy should have lost his life. But what we can say is when you are, again, I spoke about it on a couple episodes ago, when you are delaying and obstructing, meaning you're getting involved, which is what Preddy did. He did both of those. He delayed them by trying to distract them coming in and talking to them and getting in their way. They had to push them back through all these things. I'm talking about prior to that particular day in question where he was shot. We go all the way back to a couple of weeks before that when he kicked out the ICE vehicle's back rear tail light. He had already stepped up to a violent crime, so he should have been arrested that day for that one. But he is seeing on this particular incident where he dies, where he's obstructing the officers by trying to pull the lady away who they're trying to apprehend, and that ultimately ended his life. So I said it before, if they stay out of the way of what is going on, these things would not happen. So we have to look at that and we have to say, you know what, I'm in the way, I should be in the way. But everybody who's doing this, they should be at home anyways, working or taking care of their families. They shouldn't be out trying to antagonize ICE and try to delay and obstruct and ultimately get in their way. And when it's time for them to get arrested because they're committing a crime, they resist. And we see what happens time and again. You can go to YouTube and watch a million different body cam videos of officers trying to apprehend a person and they're resisting. We see the outcomes of these resisting. And within our law and scope and authority, we have the right legally to use whatever force is necessary to effect that particular arrest. That's when, again, qualified immunity kicks in because we're acting within the scope and the authority of the laws and within the training that we have received from our said agencies. So this is where the issue lies. If they don't get involved, we wouldn't have these issues. So I say to Mayor Johnson, if you can teach your people, your constituents, about how to staying out of the way of ICE when they're within the scope and they're acting within the authority of their duties, get them to stand back and stay out of the way, report and cite from a distance, these issues wouldn't be happening in the first place. But it is all designed that way to keep, guess what, the issues heightened, to keep people elevated, and to ultimately keep things out of control and to keep the media there to increase the commotion and to make sure these things are fueled. It is all designed that way. But if we take all those things out, we can reduce the amount of people that are getting hurt and the amount of people who are ultimately losing their lives. This is the blueprint to stopping all of this, but they don't want it to stop because Mayor Fry doubled down on it. Governor Tim Walz doubled down on it. And they said, we want y'all there to go in and stop what ICE is doing. We want you to report. We want you to get in the way. We want you to distract them. But we see that they're not out there distracting the Mayor Fry or Governor Walz. They're watching this behind their office after the melee and after all these things have happened. And we saw them go on TV and say they wanted ICE out of their city and state, but they've done nothing to actually help the conversation. Up until when Tom Homan came in just a few days ago, he stated after his meeting with them, it was productive. There were things they agreed on, and also there was things they disagreed on. But there's the only way to reduce these issues are by coming together, finding some type of common ground, and everybody getting on one page. This can reduce the issues that we see. Okay. And like I have said time and time again, anti ICE protesters need to stand down, go home, and stop antagonizing these ICE officials. But we know, again, the green light's been given to them. So why would they stop? And ultimately, they're being paid to get out there, disrupt. Okay, they're being paid to obstruct, and they're being paid to delay these ICE officials from doing their job. That is the bottom line. That is what we got to say. So, as Mayor Brandon Johnson has served notice on ICE, aka ICE Notice, Antoine Thomas here at Fighting for the Truth is serving notice on Mayor Brandon Johnson. You can't stop what ICE is doing. You don't have the authority to do it. You can't strike qualified immunity away from these ICE agents. And I will say, effectively, you are providing a disservice to your city police department by not helping or allowing them to help ICE when needed. Why do I say that? Because it's going to come a point in time that if the help is not there, ICE will be and they will have to continue to doing what they're doing by themselves. It only creates more chaos and violence because these people are going to get out there and stand in the way of ICE. And someone, I said it before, I'm saying it again, is going to get hurt. Ultimately, they're going to lose their lives. So the best thing to do is strike and get rid of this executive order that you put in place. Let ICE do the job. And once they do the job, they'll leave and you won't have any issues there. But until you stop the rhetoric that you're preaching, the hate that you're spewing, and guess what? The counterproductive realities of what ICE is doing stops, they're not leaving. They're going to continue to do what they do. They're going to continue to apprehend because that's the job and the duties that they have been given and the orders that they have been given to do. So listen, I have enjoyed bringing this episode to you. I hope that you enjoyed. And you know what I need you to do? I need you to do me a favor. Would you please do me a favor? Would you please do me a favor? Would you please? I'm asking you, please. Would you please do me a favor? Would you please do me a favor? Buy the truth and sell it not. Remember, you cannot sell the truth. You got to give it away. And why do we give it away? Because it is the truth. And when you know the truth will set you free. It always does. It has no other choice but to do it because it is the truth. So buy the truth and don't sell it, please. Do me a favor, don't sell it. I want to say God continue to bless our country, our president, our armed forces, and definitely please pray that God would protect the men in blue, the women and the men who are serving in law enforcement, and of course, protect the agents, the ICE agents who are out there trying to do the work that they have been given to do. And let's all do it safely and peacefully, stay safe, and until we do it again, until we meet again, God bless you.